The Vanguard was the weakest ship in the entire United Terran Defense Fleet. It was old, slow, and barely functional. Compared to the massive warships of other species, it looked like a toy. The ship's weapons were outdated, its shields could barely withstand a training laser, and the engines rattled whenever it moved. To the other species in the Galactic Alliance, the Vanguard was a joke. Even friendly alien commanders laughed whenever they saw it. Why do humans keep this piece of junk? A Selvar officer once sneered during a joint military exercise. Are they trying to make us laugh? The humans had no answer. In truth, most of them agreed. The Vanguard had been built over a century ago. It was originally a patrol ship meant to train new recruits. Over time, it had become little more than a floating relic, a museum piece that still pretended to be part of the fleet. But the humans never threw anything away. When war broke out with its Selvar dominion, the Vanguard was immediately deemed unfit for combat. It was too weak to be useful, too slow to escape danger, and too fragile to take even a single hit. The Terran High Command ordered it to be decommissioned, and the ship was quietly moved to a scrapyard orbiting a dead planet. And that should have been the end of it. But a group of rogue engineers and AI specialists had a different idea. They called themselves Project Ghost. Lieutenant Daniel Carter had spent most of his career aboard powerful battlecruisers, ships with thick armor, massive plasma cannons, and cutting-edge technology. He had never expected to end up on a junked ship like the Vanguard. But when he received a mysterious message from an old friend, he found himself staring at the abandoned vessel in the scrapyard. "Tell me this is a joke," Carter muttered. Beside him, Dr. Elise Morgan grinned. She was one of the best AI programmers in the fleet, but she had always preferred working in the shadows. She leaned against a rusted console, her expression full of excitement. "It's not a joke," she said. "It's a challenge." Carter crossed his arms. "You're telling me that instead of scrapping this thing, you want to— what? Fix it." "Not just fix it," Elise said. "Turn it into something the enemy will fear." Carter raised an eyebrow. "This ship is beyond useless. What do you expect to do? Slap a new paint job on it and hope the Selvar die laughing?" Elise chuckled. "No, Carter. We're going to rebuild this ship in a way no one expects. Forget firepower. Forget heavy armor. We're going to turn the Vanguard into a ghost." Carter frowned. "A ghost." Elise's smile widened. "A ship that doesn't rely on brute strength. A ship that moves without being seen. A ship that doesn't fight fair." Carter wasn't convinced. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "With everything the Terran High Command told us not to use," Elise said. She tapped on a tablet, and schematics appeared. Experimental cloaking tech. AI-driven predictive combat systems. Electronic warfare tools that can hijack enemy ships. The kind of stuff the brass was too scared to approve. Carter looked at the plans, his skepticism slowly fading. The idea was insane. It shouldn't work. And yet, it just might. For the next 3 months, the scrapyard became the secret home of Project Ghost. Engineers, programmers, and cybernetic specialists worked in the shadows, away from official eyes. They stripped the Vanguard down to its bare frame, keeping only what they needed. Instead of heavy weapons, they installed energy disruptors, tools designed to disable enemy ships without firing a single shot. Instead of thick armor, they reinforced the hull with advanced heat-resistant plating, making the ship harder to track. Instead of a standard AI, they created HCKO, an advanced system capable of learning and adapting in real time. The ship's engines were reworked with stolen experimental drives, giving it the ability to move like a phantom, silent, unpredictable, and fast. Every test brought new improvements. Every failure led to new breakthroughs. And soon, the weakest ship in the fleet was no longer weak. It was something else, something terrifying. The first real test came when its Selvar scout patrol stumbled upon the scrapyard. 3 enemy corvettes, lightly armed but fast, picked up strange energy readings from the abandoned sector. Their commander, expecting nothing but debris, ordered his ships to investigate. As the Selvar ships approached, their sensors flickered. Their screens turned to static. Their engines sputtered. Then, one by one, they vanished from the galactic network. No distress signals, no wreckage, no trace of what had happened. The Selvar Dominion didn't know it yet, but the Vanguard had returned, and it had become a nightmare. The Vanguard floated silently in the depths of space, its dark hull blending into the void. It was nothing like the ship it had once been. The old, broken patrol craft had transformed into something else, something faster, smarter, and deadlier. Inside the command center, Lieutenant Daniel Carter watched the screens with quiet focus. The Selvar scout ships had vanished. No wreckage, no alarms, no warnings. Just gone. "Status report," Carter said, turning toward Dr. Elise Morgan. Elise tapped her console, her eyes glowing with excitement. "All 3 enemy ships have been neutralized. No external weapons were fired. Their systems were hijacked, their engines shut down, and their life support placed in emergency sleep mode. They won't wake up for at least another 12 hours." Carter exhaled slowly. It was hard to believe. They had just disabled 3 enemy ships without a single shot. "We need to move before reinforcements come," he said. Ichicho, the ship's advanced AI, responded in a calm, synthetic voice. "Affirmative. Initiating silent drift maneuver." The Vanguard's engines didn't roar or flare with energy. Instead, the ship moved like a shadow, shifting its position without leaving a trace. The experimental cloaking systems activated, bending light and scrambling sensor signals. To the outside world, the Vanguard simply ceased to exist. The Selvar reaction. On the bridge of the XSS Vorkal, a Selvar battlecruiser, Commander Ralvok tapped his claws against his command chair. His patrol ships had reported strange energy readings, then disappeared without explanation. No distress calls, no emergency beacons, just silence. He turned to his tactical officer, a pale-skinned Selvar named Gorkan. "What do the sensors show?" Gorkan hissed in frustration. "Nothing, Commander. No debris. No signals. It's as if they were never there." Ralvok narrowed his golden eyes. That wasn't possible. A ship couldn't just disappear. Unless... His scales darkened in anger. Humans. The Terrans were weak. Their technology was outdated. Their ships were nothing compared to the war machines of the Dominion. But they were clever, cunning, unpredictable. Ralvok had fought against humans before. He had seen them win battles they had no right to win. And now, something was wrong. "Deploy another patrol," he ordered. "Find out what happened. If the humans are involved, I want them crushed." The ghost strikes again. A few hours later, 2 more Selvar corvettes arrived at the scrapyard to investigate. They scanned the sector, searching for any sign of their missing ships. They found nothing. Then, without warning, their lights flickered. Their controls froze. Inside the lead corvette, the Selvar captain snarled in confusion. "What is happening?" The ship's AI stuttered. "Unknown system interference. Main power failure. Loss off." The voice cut off. The engines died. The ship went completely dark. On the Vanguard, Carter watched the scene unfold on the tactical display. Ichicho, status. Both targets are now in full lockdown. Enemy crew are unconscious. Their communications have been silenced. Carter exchanged a look with Elise. "That's 5 ships in one day," Elise whispered. "They still don't know what hit them." Carter nodded. "And we need to keep it that way." The Vanguard drifted away, unseen, leaving behind only mystery and fear. A new legend begins. Hours later, the Selvar battlecruiser Vorkal received one final broken transmission. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a whisper. A single message from one of the disabled corvettes, sent before the systems completely failed. "We are not alone." Commander Ralvok's scales shivered. He had faced many enemies, but this was different. There was something out there, something the Dominion did not understand. And for the first time in his life, he felt fear. The Vanguard, the weakest ship in the fleet, had become something else. It had become a nightmare. The Vanguard moved through space like a ghost, silent and unseen. It was no longer just a ship. It was a weapon of fear. The Selvars still had no idea what was hunting them. They only knew that their ships were disappearing, one by one. Inside the command center, Lieutenant Daniel Carter watched the tactical display. The Selvar fleet was getting nervous. More ships were patrolling the sector, their search patterns tightening. "They know something is out here," Carter said. Dr. Elise Morgan leaned forward, studying the data. "They're afraid," she whispered. "They don't understand what's happening. That's good for us." EC-Cho, the ship's AI, spoke in its calm, synthetic voice. "Enemy battlecruiser has increased patrol frequency. Probability of detection has risen by 12%. Carter rubbed his chin. "We can't keep doing this forever. Sooner or later, they'll get lucky." Elise turned to him, eyes gleaming. "Then we need to make sure they never get that chance." Carter nodded. "Let's take this to the next level." The Selvar prepare for war. On the XSS Vorkal, Commander Ralvok sat in his command chair, his claws tapping impatiently. The reports were disturbing. 5 ships had vanished. No wreckage. No distress signals. His officers were restless. The crew was afraid. Whispers of an invisible enemy were spreading through the ranks. Ralvok bared his fangs. Fear was unacceptable. He needed answers. "Status of the sensor upgrades," he demanded. His tactical officer, Gorken, bowed his head. "Scanners have been recalibrated. We are running continuous energy sweeps." "Any results?" Gorken hesitated. "Nothing yet." Ralvok growled. This was no accident. Someone was out there, playing games with his fleet. But he was done playing. "Send a decoy ship," he ordered. "Make it look weak. If something is hunting us, let's lure it into a trap." The trap is set. The Selvar corvette drifted through space, pretending to be vulnerable. Its energy levels were lowered. Its shields appeared weakened. It sent out a soft distress signal, just weak enough to seem like a mistake. But inside, the ship was fully armed. Hidden within the hull, special sensors waited to catch any sign of their invisible enemy. Carter stared at the screen. "They're trying to bait us." Elise smirked. "That means they're scared." "That's good." Carter nodded. "But we're not going to fall for it." Instead, he had a different plan. Turning the trap against them. The Vanguard activated its stealth systems, moving in close, just out of sensor range. EC-Cho's voice was calm. "Target signal is artificial. They expect an ambush." Carter smiled. "Then let's give them one." Instead of attacking the decoy, the Vanguard sent out false signals. On the Vorkal, alarms blared. "Commander, multiple energy signatures detected." Gorken shouted. "We are picking up several ships approaching from all directions." Ralvok snarled. "Enemy fleet. Where?" The tactical screen flickered. Ghostly signals appeared and vanished. Ships seemed to be moving in fast, surrounding them. But they never stayed in one place for more than a second. It was an illusion. A trick. Ralvok's claws tightened. The enemy was not attacking them head-on. They were playing with their minds. "Do not fire," he barked. "Stay in formation. Find the real enemy." But his officers were already panicking. Some Selvar ships powered up their weapons. One of the corvettes fired into empty space. The shot hit nothing. Chaos spread through the fleet. And in that moment of confusion, the Vanguard struck. It hijacked the decoy ship systems, cutting its engines and shutting down its weapons. The Selvar crew inside went into emergency stasis before they could even react. Another ship gone. And that Selvar still had no idea how. The fear grows. The Vorkal's bridge was silent. Ralvok stared at the tactical display. One of his ships was gone. Again. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Just taken. His officers were shaken. His fleet was unraveling. And worst of all, he still had no idea what he was fighting. But he knew one thing for certain. This was no ordinary battle. This was a nightmare. And the humans were the ones bringing it to life. The Selvar fleet was in disarray. Ships moved erratically, scanning empty space, searching for an enemy they could not see. Fear spread like a virus, turning experienced warriors into nervous wrecks. On board the XSS Vorkal, Commander Ralvok paced back and forth, his claws tapping against the metal floor. His eyes burned with frustration. He was supposed to be a hunter, but now he was the prey. "We are losing control," his second-in-command, Gorkan, whispered. Ralvok stopped pacing. His tail flicked in irritation. "We are warriors of the Selvar Dominion. We do not fear ghosts. But our ships are vanishing," Gorkan said hesitantly. "The enemy leaves no trace, no signals, no wreckage. It is as if they are devouring us whole." Ralvok slammed his fist against the command chair. "Enough. I will not let my fleet fall apart like cowards." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to all ships. No one moves alone. We fly in tight formation. Any sign of the enemy, we fire without hesitation." "Yes, Commander," the officer responded, but his voice lacked confidence. Ralvok took a deep breath. He had faced many battles before, but this was different. The enemy was not using brute force. They were using something far more dangerous. They were using fear. The Hunter's Watch. Aboard the Vanguard, Lieutenant Carter watched the Selvar fleet tighten their formation. It was a smart move, but it wouldn't save them. "They're scared," Elise whispered, standing beside him. "They're trying to protect themselves." Carter smirked. "That just means they're making themselves a bigger target." Isihio's voice filled the room. "Selvar fleet has altered tactics. Cluster formation detected. Probability of blind spots in their sensors. 83%. Carter nodded. "Perfect. We don't need to pick them off one by one anymore." He turned to his crew. "We take this up a level. We hit them where it hurts." Powerless giants. Minutes later, deep inside the Selvar formation, something happened. The Vorkal's lights flickered. Screens turned to static. Then, all at once, the main communication systems shut down. Ralvok growled. "Report." Gorkan's claws clicked over the controls. "Communications are failing across the fleet. We are losing contact with." His voice stopped. His screen went black. Then, across every Selvar ship, the same thing happened. Weapons systems shut down. Shields flickered. Engines powered down. For one terrifying moment, the fleet floated helplessly in space. Inside the Vanguard, Elise watched the results of their plan. "We overloaded their systems," she said, amazed. "They didn't even see it coming." Carter grinned. "Now they know what real fear feels like." The nightmare unfolds. On the Vorkal, the crew scrambled to restore control. Ralvok's breathing grew heavy. His warriors were helpless. Then the screens came back on, but what they saw made their blood freeze. A message flashed across every Selvar monitor. "Lev," or DSAPER. Ralvok's heart pounded. Who is doing this?" No answer. And then the first ship vanished. The silent attack. The XSS Karnax, one of the strongest Selvar battlecruisers, was the first to go. One moment it was floating among its allies. The next, it was gone. No explosion, no wreckage, just missing. Panic erupted across the Selvar fleet. "We need to retreat," one officer shouted. "We must fight back," another argued. Ralvok's claws tightened into a fist. He wanted to fight. But against what? Then another ship vanished. And another. There were no warnings, no alarms, only silence. On the Vanguard, Carter watched as the Selvar formation collapsed. They were scattering, breaking their own defense. "They're running," Elise whispered. Carter leaned forward. "Not yet." He sent one final message to the Vorkal. It appeared on their screens instantly. "You were warned." Relvok's breath caught in his throat. He had never felt true fear before, but now, for the first time, he did. That Selvar had come expecting an easy hunt. Instead, they had walked into a nightmare created by humans. The Selvar fleet was in chaos. Panic spread like wildfire as ships vanished into the darkness, one after another. There were no explosions, no debris, no warnings. It was as if the enemy had become ghosts, reaching into reality and pulling ships into the void. On board the XSS Vorkal, Commander Relvok's claws gripped his command chair tightly. His once mighty fleet was collapsing before his eyes. Warriors who had faced countless battles were now trembling. "Restore communications," he barked. Gorkan, his second in command, struggled at his console. "It's no use, Commander. Our systems are still being disrupted." Relvok growled. The Selvar were an empire built on strength, but strength was useless when fighting an enemy they couldn't see. His heart pounded as he turned to his navigation officer. "What is the status of the Karnaks, the Velthor, and the Dravaks?" The officer's face was pale. "They're gone, Commander." Relvok clenched his fists. 3 of his strongest warships had disappeared without a sound. His mind raced. This was not war. It was something else. It was fear itself. The hidden terror. Aboard the Vanguard, Lieutenant Carter stood with arms crossed, watching the Selvar fall apart. "They don't know what's happening," Elise said beside him. "They think their ships are vanishing into thin air." Carter smirked. "That's because we made it look that way." Isihio's voice filled the control room. "Selvar fleet cohesion is at 27% and dropping. Estimated time until full retreat, 5 minutes." Carter nodded. "Let's push them over the edge." Shadows in the void. On the Vorkal, Gorkan's claws danced over the controls. "Commander, I've detected something." Relvok's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Gorkan hesitated. "There are strange energy readings in the area where our ships disappeared. It's highly advanced technology, unlike anything we've seen before." Relvok's mind raced. Could this be the humans? "Send a probe," he ordered. The probe launched from the Vorkal, speeding toward the last known location of the missing ships. Seconds later, the probe's signal cut off. Then, something horrifying happened. A deep, ghostly voice echoed across the Vorkal's speakers. "Your eyes do not belong here." Relvok's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" he demanded. No answer. Then the bridge lights flickered. The monitors turned to static. One by one, every Selvar ship's power dimmed. Their engines sputtered. Their weapon systems failed. They were being strangled by an invisible force. And then, across every Selvar ship, a message appeared in bold red letters. "Run. The final decision." Relvok's breathing was heavy. His warriors looked to him, fear in their eyes. That Selvar dominion had never retreated from battle. It was a sign of weakness. But this wasn't a battle. This was a nightmare. The humans had turned their weakest ship into something terrifying, something beyond the understanding of even the most powerful empires. Relvok took a deep breath. "Order all ships to retreat." Gorkan's eyes widened. "Commander, are you sure?" Relvok closed his fists. "We are not running. We are surviving." "Send the order," he said firmly. Seconds later, the remaining Selvar ships turned and fled, their engines roaring as they left human space behind. Victory in silence. On board the Vanguard, Carter watched the Selvar ships jump into hyperspace. "They're gone," Elise whispered. "We actually made them run." Carter grinned. "They thought they could crush the weakest ship in the fleet." He gestured to the Vanguard's control panels, glowing softly in the dim light. Now they'll never forget the name of the ship that turned their pride into fear. Elise smirked. What do we do now? Carter exhaled, the tension finally easing from his shoulders. Now, he looked out at the stars, where that Selvar had flood. Now we prepare for what comes next. Because one thing was certain, that Selvar would never forget what happened here, and neither would the rest of the galaxy. The battle was over. The Selvar fleet had fled. But deep inside the Vanguard, Carter knew this was just the beginning. As the crew celebrated, Carter sat in the dimly lit war room, staring at the holographic display of the battlefield. Elise walked in, arms crossed. You should be celebrating, she said. Carter shook his head. Not yet. That Selvar will come back. Elise frowned. After what we did to them. Carter leaned forward. We made them afraid. But fear can turn into anger. ECHO's voice interrupted them. Commander Carter, incoming encrypted transmission from Fleet Command. Carter straightened. Patch it through. The hologram changed, revealing Admiral Holloway. Her expression was unreadable. You did well, she said. Better than expected. But, Carter asked. The Admiral exhaled. The Selvar are massing at the edge of our territory. Intelligence suggests they're regrouping for a counterattack. Elisa's eyes widened. Already? Carter clenched his jaw. I knew it. They're coming back stronger. Holloway nodded. You have 12 hours before they return. Prepare for another fight. The transmission ended. The room fell silent. Elise sighed. 12 hours? That's nothing. Carter stood. Then we don't waste a single minute. The final defense. The crew of the Vanguard worked faster than ever. Engineers fine-tuned the ship's systems, programmers adjusted ECHO's algorithms, and gunners checked every weapon. Elise watched as Carter studied the battle plans. What's the plan, Carter? We got lucky last time. Carter smirked. We didn't get lucky. We made them scared. And we'll do it again. Elise raised an eyebrow. How? Carter pointed at the holographic display. That Selvar think we used some kind of ghost technology. We let them believe that. He looked around the room, making sure everyone was listening. We make them fear the Vanguard even more. We turn this ship into something they don't just run from, but refuse to fight at all. A slow grin spread across Elise's face. I like the sound of that. That Selvar's return. 12 hours later, that Selvar fleet returned, bigger, stronger, and angrier. Relvok sat in his command chair aboard the Vorkal, his eyes locked on the dark void ahead. Scan for human ships, he ordered. Gorkan checked the readings. Sir, there's only one. Relvok's eyes narrowed. Only one. Gorkan gulped. Yes, sir. The same one as before. Relvok's heart pounded. He had expected a full human fleet, but instead it was just the Vanguard, the nightmare that had destroyed his forces. The ship floated silently in space. No transmissions. No movement. Just waiting. Something felt wrong. Relvok's claws tightened around the armrests. Prepare all weapons. We will destroy it this time. The final trick. On board the Vanguard, Carter stood calmly, watching the Selvar fleet on the screens. They took the bait, Elise whispered. Carter nodded. Good. The Selvar fleet charged forward, weapons locking onto the Vanguard. Carter exhaled. ECHO, activate Phantom Protocol. The lights flickered. The screens dimmed. And then, the Vanguard vanished. The breaking point. On the Vorkal, alarms blared. Where did it go? Relvok demanded. Gorkan frantically checked the readings. It disappeared, Commander. Relvok's eyes widened. Impossible. Then, without warning, the Selvar ships began shutting down, one by one. Engines flickered off. Weapon systems locked up. Communications turned to static. And then, just like before, a message appeared on every screen. Leave ye. Now. Relvok gritted his teeth. No, We will not be fooled again. Then something even worse happened. The Vorkel's hull creaked. A deep, ghostly hum filled the ship. The lights flickered erratically. Whispers echoed through the ship's speakers, low, inhuman voices. You should not have returned. Panic spread through the Selvar fleet. Some ships turned and fled without orders. Others fired their weapons wildly into the darkness, hitting nothing. Relvok's breathing was heavy. His warriors trembled. The strongest fleet in the Selvar Dominion was falling apart, without a single human shot fired. This was no longer a battle. It was a message. Humans were not to be underestimated. With a shaking hand, Relvok made his decision. All ships, retreat, he ordered. The Selvar fleet turned and flowed into hyperspace, this time never to return. Victory without a shot. On the Vanguard, Elise let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. They ran again, she whispered. Carter smiled. They won't be back. Hyo's voice confirmed it. Selvar fleet has fully retreated. No hostile forces remain. The crew cheered. The Vanguard, once the weakest ship in the fleet, had just defeated an empire, twice, without ever firing a shot. Carter leaned back in his chair. Mission accomplished. Elise grinned. So, what now? Carter looked out at the stars. Now we see who else is watching. Because if the Selvar had been afraid of one human ship, the rest of the galaxy was about to learn the same lesson. And humanity was just getting started. The battle was over. The Selvar fleet had fled, and the Vanguard stood alone in the quiet void of space. But the galaxy was not quiet. Word spread fast, faster than Carter expected. From the outer colonies to the Galactic Council's central worlds, every species now knew the story. The weakest ship in the human fleet had faced an entire Selvar armada, and won, without firing a single shot. The aftermath. Carter sat in the command chair, staring at the empty battlefield. Elise leaned against the console beside him. We did it, she said. Carter exhaled. Yeah, but this is just the beginning. Hyo's voice interrupted. Commander Carter, incoming transmissions from multiple sources. Some are human, but most are not. Elise raised an eyebrow. Non-humans? What do they want? Carter nodded. Let's find out. Patch them through, Hyo. The main screen flickered, revealing multiple alien representatives. Some wore elegant robes, others military uniforms. They all had one thing in common, serious expressions. A tall, green-skinned diplomat from the Thalorian Republic spoke first. Commander Carter, the galaxy has witnessed what you did. Many now see humans differently. Carter folded his arms. Differently how? A reptilian officer from the Karvek Alliance hissed. You turned a single broken ship into a weapon of fear. Even that Selvar ran. We would rather have you as allies than enemies. Elise smirked. Took them long enough to figure that out. The Thalorian diplomat continued. Some wish to open trade with humanity. Others wish to learn your tactics. Carter exchanged a look with Elise. The Vanguard hadn't just won a battle. It had changed humanity's place in the galaxy. The Selvar's fear. Meanwhile, on the Selvar homeworld, Supreme Commander Relvok stood before the High Council. You lost to a single ship. One elder growled. Relvok's fists clenched. It was no ordinary ship. The humans turned it into something else, something unnatural. Another elder scoffed. Nonsense. Humans are not gods. Their ship was damaged, weak. Relvok slammed a fist onto the table. And yet it destroyed us. We fired every weapon, and it vanished. It shut down our systems. Our warriors heard voices inside their ships. Silence filled the room. The Selvar were a proud species, yet now they were afraid. The eldest counselor finally spoke. Then we must avoid conflict with humans. For now. Relvok frowned. For now. The counselor's eyes narrowed. One day we will understand their tricks. One day we will return. Ralvok wasn't so sure. The humans had changed, and he feared that when the Xelvar returned, the humans would be even stronger. The Vanguard's future. Back on the Vanguard, Elise stood with Carter as the crew celebrated. "We started as a joke," Elise said. "The weakest ship in the fleet." Carter smiled. "And now, we're a legend." The doors opened, and a young officer rushed in. "Sir, Admiral Holloway is on the line." Carter sighed. Always more work. They walked to the bridge, where the Admiral's face appeared on screen. "You made a lot of noise, Carter," Holloway said. Carter smirked. "That's what we do best." The Admiral's expression softened. "Because of you, new species want to negotiate with us. The Xelvar won't attack again anytime soon. But there's one thing you should know." Carter leaned forward. "What is it?" Holloway's voice became serious. "There are others watching. Stronger than the Xelvar. Older. More dangerous." Elise frowned. "And?" Holloway's eyes darkened. "They're interested in us now." A heavy silence filled the bridge. Carter exhaled. "Then I guess the Vanguard has more work to do." Elise grinned. "Good. I was getting bored." Carter turned to the crew. "All right, people, the galaxy isn't going to explore itself. Let's see what's waiting for us out there." The Vanguard turned, engines glowing, and disappeared into the stars. The weakest ship in the fleet had become something far greater. It had become a legend.